So I'll just get into it. We have Patrick Ryan, Claire Messud, and Richard Russo, three writers who, I guess they don't even need introductions in a way. And I'll get right into it. All three of you have written big, bountiful, generous novels, and it's a fun thing to experience. For a novel to really take all the room it needs, you really have to create a sense of place. And all three of you have done that in different ways. You've created towns that you populate, and the story begins there. Or Claire, you've described a world of exiles with a memory of a place hanging over it all. So let's just begin with talking about place and in these novels. So. Mm-hmm.
Well, place obviously is very, very important to me. There are all kinds of ways, all kinds of lenses through which we can view the world. Perhaps because of where I come from a kind of left behind place in upstate New York. Gloversville is the name. And because I come from this place, from a very lower middle class family, not much money in our family, not much money in the neighborhood, the whole neighborhood that I grew up on. So my lived experience is all seen through the lens of place and class. All sorts of things have happened to me between, back when I was a kid there and now. But my mother in particular was absolutely determined, because she grew up in this place too, this left behind place. And she was absolutely determined that I was going to get the hell out of there. And everything that she did in my young life was set in that direction of getting me from this place that she desperately wanted to escape. She wanted that escape to be effected through me. And I think one of the great disappointments of her life, really, was that she thought that this would provide a clean getaway. Poor woman. Of course, the getaway was anything but clean. I have returned to that place that she wanted me to escape from. Book after book after book. And even when I go to other places that could not be much more removed from Gloversville, New York, even when I go to Martha's Vineyard, for instance, somehow or other the characters in that book, just like all my other books, come from places like the place that I grew up in. It is my one place.
Yeah.
I call it by different names, but that's what it is. That's
right.
I can't seem to escape it.
Yeah, it's Thomasville in Bridge of Sighs.
Thomaston and Bridge of Sighs, Mohawk, the North Bath trilogy of Fool novels, Bath, Empire Falls.
Yeah. It's a great world. And Patrick, actually, you also created a very American town, Ohio, this time.
Yeah, I had the experience with my first book was a collection of interwoven short stories, and it was set in my hometown, and I called it by my hometown. And so it wasn't hard to do the research for that. It was kind of fun, but I found out I had to adhere to which direction the traffic flowed, when they got their first drive-through, bank, pagoda, and all of that stuff. And so I really wanted to make up a town for this book. But what I found, and maybe I just projected this onto the whole process, but I then kind of worried that I was presenting an archetype of a place. And I didn't really want to make the perfect town that would represent everything going on in the Midwest. I just wanted to make a town that felt convincing. And the further I got into it, the further I felt myself dipping my toes into all sorts of Americana. But I found it unavoidable. So ultimately, I just hope it feels like a real convincing place.
Absolutely.
And for me, I was going to a place I didn't grow up in for this book, for Buckeye. I was loosely basing it on my father's hometown, but that town was actually way too small for my needs. So I needed something a little larger, but that was a constant worry. Was there any verisimilitude in this?
And what was the town that you were from, and what was it?
I'm from Merritt Island, Florida.
Okay. Oh, well, all right. That's not Buckeye, is it?
No.
No. And it sounds really,
Yeah.
you say the word island, it sounds nice. It was just a little town. But
Yeah.
but to go into Northeast Ohio, I lived there for a couple of years in grad school. I knew people who lived up in the Port Clinton stretch on the lake, and got to know that state. But it was a total leap of faith, just to make it all up and hope it felt real.
Well done.
So
Yeah.
thanks.
Well done. Well done.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I feel as though, to go back to what Chris was saying a little earlier, I think it's true for all of us that there's place and there's time, and your book spans a lot of time, and your books together span a lot of time, and my book spans a bunch of time, and it is it always seems to me that character so there are lots of different kinds of fiction, of course, but the fiction that I love and that interests me is about what it's like to be alive on the planet that we live in, right? In an era, either past or present, or maybe a slight future, but like the far future is harder for me, and I feel as though who we are comes out of where we are, when we are, and where we've been before. And so that question of place, it's about this interaction and this sort of relationship between the different characters and the place that they're in. So that Margaret's relation to the town is completely different from Becky's relation to the town, even though they're in the same town at the same time.
Yes.
Right. And they behave differently, and the stories that they have are completely different. So place seems to me essential and absolutely central, and also inseparable from all the other elements too. And listening to Chris talk so wonderfully and read so wonderfully from your novel, I think you're out there somewhere, but the thing that seems so painful to me when you speak about your mom, and it's something that's saying like you can get out of here, right? And so my novel is it's inspired by my father's family, who were Pieds Noirs, the French colonials in North Africa, and my French grandfather came from. His mother was a single mom and an elementary school teacher, and his grandparents were illiterate, and the leap of possibility in that generation. He was born at the beginning of the 20th century, and the leap of what was possible then. I mean, if you read Annie Ernaux, you know that Annie Ernaux's parents, they came from very humble origins, and she's a Nobel Prize winning novelist. I mean, the 20th century was about that. With lots of challenges and setbacks and so on, but I think there was a real hope for the future, and what seems, sorry, I'm off on a little tangent, but what seems so painful, listening to Chris talk about write about the kids in Minnesota in 2019, is that there doesn't seem to be that hope.
Actually, speaking of, all three of you wrestle, I mean, you're talking about stories that go over generations now, and all three of you have written really beautifully about, I don't want to call it disappointment really, but I want to call it, facing up to reality. And you're able to do it with a real tenderness, but even so, in the case of this strange eventful history in particular, I was sort of disappointed and frustrated by Francois and, how he ended up thwarted in a way. And I was wondering how you can make these stories real and yet infuse them with so much kind of tenderness and hope and reality all at the same time. So, yeah.
Okay, I'll just get this out of the way. The way I do everything that you just described is by doing it the way I don't want it about 6 or 7 times. And, just drafting and drafting and drafting and listening to other people. That's just a real nerdy craft answer.
That's
but
okay.
It's only about like scraping my way in and then having people tell me how to scrape it a little further and what parts to just sweep away.
So you did lots and lots of drafts on this one?
Yeah, I would just, the parts I wasn't satisfied with, I would just remove and rewrite without really looking at them, looking at what I'd done before. But that's a really kind of a crafty answer.
That's okay. We can talk craft too. This is a pretty sophisticated audience. I think, I think we can handle that.
I might say, it seems to me, maybe this is again sort of at a tangent a little bit, but in the era precisely as you said this morning of the box office, right? Of where film takes up so much of our narrative space, film, television, visual narratives, and I always think that that the fiction exists to do what only fiction can do, and that for me it's so much about interiority, and it's about what doesn't even break the surface, and that the outside life can be. There's a wonderful thing in Lady with a Little Dog, in Chekhov's short story, where Gurov, who's having this affair with the lady he's had this affair with the lady with the little dog, and then there's a time when they're not in contact, and then he goes and visits her. But he's married and has children, but he's had many affairs before, but he's obsessed with her and he keeps thinking about her, and he's walking his kid to school and he thinks, how can it be that the thing that's most important to me in the whole world nobody knows about? And then his second thought is, that's true for everybody. And I always think that's what fiction is. So it is that like in Tolstoy, in Anna Karenina, when now I forget everybody's name, but it's Levin's brother, the judge, is supposed to. There's the moment where he and is she called Varvara, the young woman who Kitty has brought. They're supposed to get engaged, and everybody thinks they're going to get engaged, and they go into the forest to pick mushrooms, and she thinks he's going to ask the question, and then he says, what kind of mushroom is that? And then the moment passes, and then he never asks her, right? And I feel like that's a tiny moment in life, but it's also enormous, because her entire expectation of how her life would go is altered in that. So I guess I feel that that's what fiction, that's what life is actually like, and that's what fiction can share with us.
That was the sneeze.
That was a sneeze. Yeah.
That's right. That's going to be our theme now.
I would have a very different kind of answer to that. To go back to your point about tenderness, I find that tenderness in my novel, such as it exists, comes from something very simple, and that is that those are moments when I'm out of myself. For me, one of the great things about being a novelist is that I get a break from being Rick Russo. I'm always looking for I'm much more interested in spending time with characters like Sully, who's based on my father, but also Officer Raymer in the first Fool novel, and then Chief of Police Raymer in the other Fool novels. It's just so easy for me to feel tenderness for those people, because just by the simple act of my own disappearing.
Yeah.
That's for a novelist, isn't that part of what we do? Isn't that part of the joy of what we do? It's just getting over ourselves, and
And it's a joy of reading, too.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And building characters seems like such a generous thing to do for the novelist as well. You know, we're kind of getting away from the notion that writing is self-expression, you know, and there's something much more important there, you know, when the author can disappear into it. I think that's kind of beautiful.
Well, it's interesting too because yes, it's true. I mean, even as I was saying that, I realized that it's a little bit more complex than that. Yes, I get to disappear. Rick Russo gets to disappear in favor of Sully or Officer Raymer or all of that. But that's not to say that Rick Russo is totally gone, because these people come out of me, you know? So it's both, it's a paradox that I've never been able to thoroughly understand for myself, that it's both a release from myself, but also a way of kind of looking at my lived experience that's not quite, it's not I don't think of it as self-centered. Maybe it is. I don't know.
But please.
Isn't it? I mean, I feel as though that it's about compassion, right? It's about inhabiting. It's about inhabiting somebody.
It better had me. Yeah.
I mean, that's the hope,
Yeah,
right?
no, yeah,
It's about inhabiting some other psyche. And of course, it's limited by what we can imagine, or like, you know, or the limits of who we are.
And to a certain extent by our lived experience. I don't
Yes,
write about all
totally.
things equally well because I haven't lived
Right.
all lives. I've only,
Totally.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's also just interest in other people, you know,
Yeah.
that's a kind of prerequisite for any of it.
Well, I mean, we're getting into slightly different territory now, but lived experience plays an enormous role. It has to play. We only have the one life, but we aspire to so many others because they're wonderful. We just. One of my favorite characters of all of my fictional characters, one of my favorites is Sister Ursula in The Horus Child. Sister Ursula is an octogenarian Belgian nun. What earthly reason could Richard Russo possibly have for creating a fictional character when Richard Russo has never and is never going to be a woman, a nun? He'd never been to Belgium when the character was created. There's simply no rational, I mean, if you think about it, there's simply no rational reason for me to go there, except I loved her. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. And so it's compassion, to your point. That's exactly what it was. I'm never going to be an 80-year-old Belgian nun.
You never know.
Well,
But so it was partly to explore something that was very, very distant from your own experience.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And have you guys like done characters with that in mind? Like, how far can I go?
Yeah, but it's really interesting what both of you all are saying, I think, because I fully agree, you're right to get away from yourself.
Yeah.
You write fiction so that
Yeah.
you're not writing about yourself. And you create characters that interest you, and they're not going to be you, because that's the whole point. But then at the end of the day, when you have your finished product, they're all saying and thinking all the stuff that would have been the way your synapses fire. And, you know, in the same way that the themes that are going to emerge in your book, if you don't start out with theme in mind, which I don't, because I just couldn't really function that way, it's going to end up being there. And it's going to end up being there just despite my trying to avoid it or not. And it's going to be because of me.
Right.
Yeah.
And not because of the themes that emerge out of those
It's
characters.
going to reflect your preoccupations and the things. Yeah.
So I think no matter
I think
how
that's
far
right. Theme comes last. That's what you hope to figure out by the end of the book.
Yeah, I want to see it in the rear. I want other people to tell me what the theme
Yeah.
is. And I said, that's really cool.
We can't write
So
the book and the Cliff Notes, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, I wouldn't. If I knew the theme, I wouldn't write the book. Why would I write it?
So theme comes last, then what comes first?
Character.
Characters?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And plot only comes because it has to at some point.
Right.
That's interesting because I wanted to bring up originally, there's this one single sort of writer's advice essay that I've ever read, and it's Elizabeth Bowen, and I absolutely love it. It's very mysterious. It's kind of telegraphic, the way she writes. And so her advice all comes out almost hieratic. And she says that plot, and I don't know if I agree either, but she says that plot, she calls it the pre-essential. And I've never really understood that or understood what her point was about that.
What does pre-essential mean?
I don't even know.
Pre-essential.
Yeah. She said,
Pre-essential.
the line goes, it's essential, it's
Okay.
pre-essential. So I think that what she's saying
Is she saying the plot comes first?
yeah, exactly that. And I think that she is suggesting even that the end point, that having the end point in mind at the beginning is key to structuring the whole thing. And very, very few writers actually have ever told me that or anything like that. So,
John Irving says something like that. But
I think that, there's a craft essay that I've given students and from a big book by Janet Burroway. And I always feel it's a little cute. It's quite cute. But she says it's the 3 Ds, drama equals desire plus danger. Right, and I feel like if you think of that as somebody wants something and there's an obstacle, right, and it seems to me that you probably need some that, right, like to move things forward, there has to be some friction of some kind because. Although right now I'm thinking, but even
But isn't that conflict? Yes,
that's conflict.
That's conflict.
So it's not plot.
Yeah.
But I'm just, I feel as though surely, I mean, we could talk a long time maybe about what plot is.
It worries me to think of plot as pre-essential because so many of my books don't have plots.
But they do have conflicts. So maybe what she means is conflict.
Yeah.
Right? Because plot being the arrangement of conflict.
I think she was making a distinction between incident and plot. You know, that there's this, it's what's the, strategy and tactics. It was just that kind of a difference that she was talking about. But in any case, if you guys start with, or tend to start with character, then how do you get things in motion? There's got to be something that just happens to start the whole thing. And they used to, I can't remember who it was who sort of described the acte gratuit, that out of, this purely pointless little incident, you build the whole story. And
Who wants to field that one?
yeah. So
I can just give you an example. When I know I've got something, in my novel Nobody's Fool, the book begins with the main character Sully having fallen off a ladder and shattered his knee, and as a result of that, and he has spent his entire life doing really hard physical manual labor. And now he's fallen off that ladder, he's shattered his knee, as a result of which he can't work. But he tries to go back to school with a bunch of young people, trying to learn something where he wouldn't have to put all that weight on his broken knee, and discovers that he just can't be there. He can't be there with those kids, he's not like them. And by the time he finishes a couple weeks in that class in refrigeration repair, or so whatever it was he was going to take, he discovers that he can't do that. He can't not work. So you've got a man who can't work anymore, and he's also discovered that he can't not work anymore. What do you do? My answer to that as the novelist is, I have no idea. Let's find out. Because that's when I know I have something. When I've put a character, to go back to your point about conflict and that kind of energy going from event, that's when I've found an impossible situation, I think, good. Yeah.
But do you have an idea? both of you, I'd ask this, do you have an idea of, even if you don't have the plot worked out, of the emotional landing pad for each one of your main characters? Like, you know where you want this book to be at the end? Do you have a vague idea, or can you do it with absolutely no idea?
I wrote my first novel with no idea, and that was a little like setting off in a small boat with oars and a great vast open sea, and I would never do that again.
You survived.
I survived, I would never do that again, personally. I feel like, even a list of 10 things on a piece of paper, even if it changes, even if,
Yeah.
right, something, yes. I don't know about you guys, but, yeah, I have to, what, do you know, need to know I need to know something.
Yeah, even if I change it along the way,
Totally.
I just, it's the same kind of analogy. Like, I love that is it Doctorow, the fog, the headlights
Yes.
and the fog, when you write a novel?
Right. You
Yeah.
can't, yeah.
And I think that's wonderful. But I have to have some idea where I'm going, even if I change that later.
Yes, me too.
But I'm sorry, but with the books like the North Bath trilogy, where they cover a
Yeah.
certain amount of days, did you start those books?
I have no idea where I'm going. Wow. None.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's amazing.
Amazing.
Yeah, I
But
don't.
But you know who's going to be there.
I'm sorry?
You know more or less who's, as it were, in town.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I know that. I know. Yeah, I just have every confidence that that Sully and Raymer or whoever these people, they'll tell me where I'm going.
Oh my gosh.
Is that your experience, Patrick, too? No?
Oh my gosh. I've been wanting to ask that question. I wanted to bring. I brought that question to Florida to ask you.
Yeah.
How did that work? And I really thought that was the last answer I would have expected for those books. That you didn't know and you were finding your way. That's the most impressive thing.
They're incredibly tight. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of impressive.
Because by the end of it,
Nothing
you couldn't
extraneous.
imagine them having, as a reader, you couldn't imagine them having fallen out any other way than they
so,
did.
So here's a corollary question. Maybe, I don't know how many drafts you do, and maybe it just comes out in one perfectly as it is. Or is it something where there's a draft where then you have the shape and then as it were, it tightens, or no?
Well, for me,
I was gonna
the
say no.
beginning, the first third of the book will get many revisions because there are mistakes that are made in there.
Right.
So the second third of the book won't get as many revisions because you've gone through so many doors. What's working, you have fewer choices now. The last third of the book might not be revised really very much at all.
That makes sense. Yeah.
But I mean, part of it for me too is the kind of writer that I am. And the reason that it works for me, where it wouldn't necessarily work for every writer to not know where I'm going, is that I am a writer who works almost completely in scene. Time almost never speeds up. If you think, I really, with very few exceptions, all of my novels take place over like a weekend. That's the amount of fictional time that's going forward. There'll be a lot of flashbacks. So it's not like that's the only time.
Sure.
There are flashbacks, but basically the book takes place, all of my books, very few exceptions, take place over a weekend. Why? Because I want to write these books almost entirely in scene, which means that time is going to go slow. Time goes fast when you narrate, right? When you fast forward.
Foreshorten it.
Yeah. And the reason that I do that is simply very, very selfish. Because I learn about these characters by letting them talk. They can't talk. They can't talk either to me. They can't talk to me unless they're talking to each other, and that has to happen in real time. I don't want to fast forward the following weekend, a year later, something like that. I want it to happen. But that's because I know what I'm good at, and I know what I'm not good at, and I'm not good at writing time going faster. But I'm also just not. I just don't see very well. But I hear, and what my strength as a writer is dialogue. So I just do things where I can just let people just talk and talk and talk? Because that's
Well, I also feel like,
kind of what I do.
I also feel like, I mean, there's a good history. It's sort of Aristotle's advice, right? The unities of time and place. So
Yeah.
you make it a short span of time and you have everybody more or less together.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then that creates an intensity for all of us, your readers.
But Richard, you also have such a storyteller's voice, and I often, even if you're not talking about other characters, that voice comes through very often, and it sort of tightens it up. And I'm wondering if there's a, sort of more discursive way that other writers could have, for instance, you, Claire, you don't have quite that tone, that storyteller's tone, let me say.
No, I mean, different books are different. A first-person narrative has, I've written, I think one book, just one in the first person, maybe two, maybe. Anyway, and a first person is telling the story. In this most recent novel, there are 5 different points of view, and almost 4 of them are close third, and then one of them is first person.
Right.
But I think there's as a reader there's a real joy in having that storyteller's voice. I mean, it's a character who's taking you through a novel, and that's or a short story, but it's a particular delight. Yeah, but that's not how I haven't written anything in that way. No.
Patrick, have you been writing first person?
I don't like it. It's not
You don't?
I really enjoy it when I'm writing a short story, but I haven't written one of those in quite a while. It's just not my happy place for a longer project. And then maybe it's a shortcoming that I can't separate the narrator from myself enough.
Right.
To go back to
Yeah.
what we were saying before, I'm not interested
Yeah.
in writing. I don't want my personality funneled into this first person.
Well, and there's also
Character.
there's often a hidden first person in a
Yeah.
third person narrative.
I had
But-
to with this third person narrator, and it's a narrator that you both do incredibly well, and it was a first embarking on that kind of thing for me, any sort of omniscient thing. But I just finally decided that the narrator wasn't me, that I had hired, sort of contracted the narrator to come in and do this, and I was just going to oversee what they were doing, and that kind of liberated my head in a way.
Right.
Can I ask you a question, Patrick? I'm trying to remember back to my first couple novels. I mean, obviously, I'm 76. I'm at the
You have
Much farther-
4
much-
years to become that nun.
I'm not going to write, in what time I have left, I'm not going to write nearly as many books as I've already written. That much we know. I'm trying to remember when it was that I figured out what I was good at. And I guess the question that I would ask you after having written Buckeye, and I can tell you that you're very, very, very good on the basis of that novel. But I guess what I would ask you is, as someone that a much younger writer, did writing Buckeye teach? Do you know what you're good at? Do you know what you're good at? Did it teach you? Did you teach you that, or is it still part of what you're discovering as a writer, what you're good at? Because we all play to our strengths, but how do you play to them if you haven't figured out what they are yet? If you're younger and
Well, one thing I carried into it was something that I picked up from somebody along the way, and I don't know what was the key to writing. I think to writing what we would consider villains, or any character who's doing an unpleasant thing, is to keep in mind that they don't conceive of themselves as villains.
Yeah.
And they always have a reason for doing what they're doing, and their own logic. And that sort of fed into my reaching for compassion for all the characters I write about. And I think I carried that in, and it helped. And working for years as an editor of a short story magazine, and cutting my teeth on short stories, I've really had a lot of exposure to excess that doesn't need to be there. And so I think that I learned that I had learned from those, from my job going into this, that nobody has time for it. Well, to come back to the whole theme of the conference, nobody's got time for that. Nobody's got time for your third sentence that already says what you said in that sentence, for any repetition or anything like that, and just being economical.
Well, that's something beautiful about all of your work, and that is that you've kind of pared away anything that doesn't have to do with, that isn't in the service of the book. But I have a feeling that, everybody here has read your books and is probably kind of excited to see if they can ask you some questions. So maybe if we started doing that.
I have a question over here in the left side of the house.
Okay, yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about how you develop the voice of your characters? For instance, Mr. Russo, how did you find the voice of that Belgian nun?
You learned Flemish?
That's a good question. You can always tell a good question because you don't know how to answer it. I don't know. I just, I have known early on, going back to something we were talking about earlier, we've been talking about, is discovering when you're a younger writer what your strengths are. And because I sometimes write screenplays now, and I worked with one of the great directors, Robert Benton, on a number of films, and one of the things that I learned from working with Robert Benton was that he just had this marvelous eye. And before he became a film director, he was a director of photography at, I believe, Esquire magazine, if I'm remembering correctly. But when he would make a movie, you could tell he would storyboard it in a way that he would all of his camera shots. He knew everything that he was going to do, and it was just a great eye. And part of it was that Benton grew up dyslexic. And he knew as a result of that, there were certain things that were going to give him trouble. But what he had was this incredible eye. He could just storyboard the whole thing, scene by scene by scene, slow it down. He could tell you exactly what was going to be there. And when we worked together, what was interesting was that it was a marriage of his eye in my ear, because I'm half blind. I see the world like everybody else does, but nothing registers there. Nothing comes in through these eyes, despite the fact that I'm seeing. When my wife and I go out places, she'll remember from when we went to dinner someplace, she could describe what the restaurant was like from 20 years ago. And go back, sure enough, there it is. It hasn't changed. I didn't remember a damn thing about it. But I might have overheard a conversation on the next table. Somebody said something that became an earworm, and I would triage that. Whenever that happens, I would triage that and say, I'll have use for that later. Maybe not now, but I'll have use for that later. And so having discovered that through working with Benton, that's part of what I realize now, that I don't learn through anything I see. I learn through things that I hear. Which, I mean, he would map those films. He would map those films out that we worked on together, but the dialogue was mostly mine.
Mm-hmm. I might say, just to jump in, that for me, that it's that thing of everything being interwoven, right? And the embodiment of characters, right? So what their voices, you're wonderful at dialogue. It also conjures for me, when I read your dialogue, a physical presence, right? And because different sorts of different physical people speak in different ways, and you know, and so I feel
Do you feel like you're seeing them when
Yeah.
you're listening to them?
Yeah, I
Because that's
do.
interesting, because I very seldom
You don't
describe
see
my
them.
characters
Yeah.
in,
No, but
but you see them,
but so
but
I'm
when
like-
they speak like that,
I'm like your wife. And I live with somebody who
Yeah.
hears, and you can play me a piece of music, and I will say I love that, but you can play it to me an hour later, and I won't necessarily remember it, but he will.
Yeah.
But I know I recognize faces and look at pictures, and he
Right.
does. So I feel like I'm picturing everything. So
Yeah.
when I'm reading, I'm always
Yeah.
So and I feel like the voices make me picture certain
Sure.
people certain
Sure.
ways, which is
yeah.
How does your
Strange
memory
how
work,
that works.
Patrick?
Yeah.
What's that?
Does your memory work through the eye or the ear?
More through the ear.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I care more about that, I think. And I think that I heard somebody say, this really upset me a little bit, but because I think I have such a great memory, but then apparently when we're remembering something from way back, what we're really remembering is the last time we remembered it.
yes,
Right,
we
right.
reinvent
Yeah.
them.
Yeah, that sucks. I really thought, I just thought I had all these moments nailed. Yeah. But I think that my tool for tracing back is always oral and not visual, yeah.
But it's interesting because maybe every time we're re-remembering and sort of rewriting the memory, we're making it better.
I know, but that's not the same as having a really good memory.
It's not making it the same as true. No.
Yeah.
I'm always afraid it's making it more conventional and that I'm losing the particular thing that made it so special in the first place.
We have a question here in the back.
Back here.
I have a question that's on theme. I have a friend who's in a book club that has a rule that they don't read any books over 350 pages. And the books that I read from the three authors on stage are all longer than that.
in some considerably longer in some cases, yeah.
And I enjoyed every one of them. So my question is, do you think about length? Does your agent give you pushback? Does your publisher, does your editor ever talk to you about book lengths in this time of short attention?
Excellent question.
Yeah. Who wants to tackle it?
Well, I don't worry about it when I write, just because and I don't worry about a short story, how long a short story would be when I wrote those either, because as we all know, if you write them, The Kiss of Death is 30 pages, double space. If you get to that, then your story doesn't have much of a chance of getting accepted anywhere. But I always thought you can't worry about it. It's got to be as long as it's going to be. And if you end up with a novella, it needed to be a novella. My editor at times, when this thing got really pear-shaped, would just would say to me, wouldn't say this book is getting too long, but would write in the margin something like, "I'm getting concerned about what the reader is reading toward."
Nice phrasing. I like that.
Yeah.
That's a good
and
one.
so then I would say, well, now I am worried too about that. But that was always about shortening, and I think, my novel was about 100 unnecessary pages longer, because it wasn't taking the story 100 pages further. It was just 100 pages doing more of what
Within.
it's already doing.
Yeah.
Just filling it up,
Right. That's what Bowen says about irrelevance and sort of paring that away
Yeah.
in the first draft.
I think stories have the length that you have to let them have the length they need to have. And I think, one of the things that, back to the teaching again, that I find, I've taught in some summer programs, and now people come with these lists. There are obviously people out there in the publishing world sending out lists of sort of just random directives. So that people say, you can't have I've been told you can't have a flashback until after page 50.
Ah, yeah.
And I'm like, really? Why?
Yeah, it's
Who
very
said?
disturbing.
Right? I think that, you have to, I know that people have short attention spans, and look, I'm sure that your friend's book group is not the only one that has eliminated all of us from their possible reads. There will be many, but I feel like you can't, as a writer, you have to, as you say, try to go eliminate everything that's excessive. But you can't like cut it, as if it were a person. You can't say, well, then I'm going to have to cut your arm off to get you through the door.
Yeah, yeah. Good metaphor too.
Do we
I
have
would
time
say
for
that,
another question?
Just to add one more thing to that is that, of course, I'm a writer who made his reputation before the internet, and people are used to what I do, and they wouldn't expect me, I don't think, to do anything differently. But my daughter Kate is also a novelist. Her second novel just came out, and she was told exactly those kinds of things, that the book should be shorter, that a book of this length is going to have a very difficult time getting published or being published well. So if you're a younger writer, you are going to be much more likely to be faced with those kind of autocratic rules being passed down than certainly someone my age. But it's a real concern. It's a real concern. The younger a writer you are, the more a real concern that is.
We have one more question here.
Okay, great.
Thank you. Picking up on the theme of the ending, Claire, you mentioned your first novel you didn't have the ending in mind, but your most recent one, I'm wondering how you came to that was going to be your ending and in my mind it was a little bit of a surprise.
Do you mean the epilogue? Or do you mean what happened? There's a flashback to 100 years before at the end of the book. Yeah, so I absolutely knew that was, I don't want to have a sort of whole spoiler alert.
Spoiler.
But what I would say is that the novel, which spans 3 generations and a whole bunch of countries, and is based on my father's family's history. And my my paternal grandfather, spent some years of his retirement writing a family memoir for my sister and me that is 1,500 handwritten pages with letters and telegrams and photographs stuck in it with Scotch tape that now is coming unstuck. And it's in 5 red binders that were for a long time in my grandparents' apartment. And, well, after they died, and then when it was sold, I put them in a suitcase and brought them to my house. What that, yes, that we could talk more off stage about, but that was for me a known and a central part of the narrative, but also, just very quickly back to the thing of plot. E.M. Forster makes this distinction between plot and story. And story is the events that you could put in chronological order, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And plot is sort of how you arrange them so they have meaning, right? And whether you decide to start at the end or tell it, in from 3 different points, whatever. Those are plot questions, right? About how you reveal the information. And there's information in that epilogue that, if it were in a prologue or in chapter 1, would result in a completely different book. So, so that's, just a small example. If you think about it, I don't know about you, but at my age, like, what did I know first about Germany? I knew about World War II. That was the first thing I knew about Germany. So then you teach me about Goethe or Beethoven. I'm like, look, preparing for world domination. Even then, so like all roads lead through that first knowledge, because you can't unknow it, right? Like, what would it be like to read Goethe or hear Beethoven without knowing, about what happened later. So that just to explain that those are things that an author's always thinking about, is how do you arrange the dissemination of information, because it's going to be a different story or a different experience depending how you do that.
That's great. That's brilliant. Okay, I think that's all the time we have. But
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you,
You're
David.
brilliant. You made it.
Thank you.
You made it happen.